Here at Prophecy Watchers, we consider ourselves to be very privileged indeed. And why are we privileged? Because we get to talk to people like Carl Teichrib, whose book, Game of Gods, is absolutely wonderful. Carl Teichrib, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Now, I have made my way through this book. It is a book.
It is a book.
It's got information in it. And when I first met you, I said words to the effect, Carl, to me, this book is the world's longest prayer request because you document what's happening in the world today. And every time I read about something in your book, I stopped and said, Lord, please help us. Our world is falling apart.
All I did, Gary, was I documented the context behind the spiritual reality of our times. Really, in many respects, this is what your neighbors believe, what your family believes.
Yeah.
Maybe not to the extent, the detail, the complexity of it, but the essence of it is there. And yes, we are in an age when we as Christians need to pray. We're being challenged, but not only are we being challenged, we need to look at how we respond to that challenge. And prayer, yes, I like the approach you take. Prayer, this is a long prayer request.
It really is. And let's talk about the title, Game of Gods. When I first read the title, Game of Gods, all sorts of imagery entered my head. I had no idea
Right.
what this Game of Gods is. What is it?
I wrestled with finding a title. I wrestled with it a lot. And one evening, as we were sitting around in our kitchen, my son, as I was describing what the book was about, and taking it from the Genesis 3 context, whereas Genesis 3, Adam and Eve are being deceived. The serpent says, you will be as God, you will know good and evil, you will be as God, and you will never die through special knowledge. And my son looked at me and he said, we've been playing games of gods, haven't we? Ever since Genesis 3, we've been playing games of gods. We know good and evil. And at the same time, we're constantly living this first lie. And really, Game of Gods, this reflects the complexity of that first lie as it's played out in politics, technology, culture, religion, philosophy, right down to our living rooms and into our own households.
Carl, your book called Game of Gods has a theme, and I think we ought to establish the theme before we go any further.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because how do you condense 500 plus pages of material? How do you condense it? And I was honestly wrestling with it. I was wrestling with how you drew this together. And coming home one day from church with my wife, literally the day before we had the book published, these words came to me. And I'll just read it off of my introduction because I have it in my introduction. I have it at the back of the cover as well. Humanity has three great desires: to be as God, to be masters of meaning and destiny, to build heaven on earth. This is that story. And really, that's what this is. This is man's desire, a critique and a journey into understanding how man is attempting to play God, how we're attempting to find our own meaning, our own purpose, and how we desire to build heaven on earth the way we see fit. And this pulls out of the biblical themes of Genesis chapter 3, to be as God. It pulls out of the account of the Tower of Babel as we work to construct our own edifice to our own greatness. It explores what we attempt to do in finding our own salvation. And really, in many respects, the book is just a massive documentation of humanity searching for its own redemption.
And what struck me is the fact that it really goes back to the garden, when Satan said to Eve, "You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." The big promise,
right?
Which of course was a lie.
Right.
And from that day to this, fallen man has struggled to be as a god. Now, Your research is different, I think, from most people's research in that you actually go various places. You meet people. You go to festivals, convocations, and you actually talk to the people who are participating in these things. And I have to tell you, after reading Carl's book, there are an amazing number of false religions out there. And you're very familiar with those.
You know, the world has become increasingly complex. At one time, if you would have looked at the early 1960s, late 1950s, you might have said secularism is where we were going. Now it's religious pluralism. It's a complex reality of all kinds of faiths, all kinds of spiritual pursuits, and they're all clamoring for attention. And Christianity, biblical Christianity, stands apart. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is a world that has become very convoluted. And you're right, as I go to these events, as I go to festivals, as I go to the Parliament of World Religions, you're seeing a smorgasbord of spirituality. Whatever is there, whatever you desire, it's all there.
For example, you've gone to a place called the Burning Man Festival.
Yes.
Now, there are a lot of people who may have heard those words, may not.
Right.
What is it?
Oh, golly. Yes, Burning Man is found in chapter 14 of the book. Burning Man is, at one time, would have been considered a countercultural festival. Festival is not the right way of saying it. It's more like a gathering. It's a construction of its own city, and approximately 75,000 people participate. I've gone for the last couple of years. I go for research purposes because this is the cutting edge of culture. It's where the world comes together. It's where Silicon Valley comes together. I view it in many respects as the unofficial United Nations of Silicon Valley. And so it's an environment where you interact with tech elites, cultural trendsetters, social change agents, where they're very open about what they're doing. And I go sitting in the workshops to document, to understand, to try to grasp where they're taking our culture, because they are the cultural gatekeepers. But we do something a little bit more. I go with a couple of people, and last year we had a small handful, and we set up a tent. We set up a tent with a sign, and the sign says, Camp of the Unknown God.
Wow.
And what we do is we take Paul's approach as when he went to Mars Hill, and we want to see, is there a model? Is there a model for how we as Christians need to respond to a paganized culture? Because that's what we have. When we're talking about all these other religions, all these various spiritual pursuits, it's not that we have a secularized culture. We have a paganized culture. Paganized meaning this, and my friend Dr. Peter Jones from Truth Exchange really pulls this together well. Pagan in the sense that the culture is saying God, man, and nature share the same essence. They are fundamentally all the same. It's all one, or oneness. Whereas the biblical worldview is no, it's not. God is distinct, separate, unique, holy. Isaiah 40 beautifully portrays the uniqueness of our God. And so reality, and I like how Dr. Jones puts this, reality is either oneism or two. Oneism being everything is all sharing the same essence. Twoism being God, separate and distinct, and then creation, everything else. And so we go setting up this Camp of the Unknown God specifically to interact with that message of, and we build it around the question, is reality one or is reality two? And so we took the themes found in this book, which is really an exploration of oneism and its spiritual pursuits, and we took it to the place where that's actually happening, where it's percolating, it's boiling over in the cultural setting, and we wanted to see, can we talk to people? Can we actually interact with people? Can we take Paul's approach of Mars Hill and say, who's the unknown God? And honestly, we have dozens of conversations all week long with people who are hungry. They all have been searching for spirituality,
now,
but
Paul,
they're hungry.
Paul, excuse me for interrupting,
Yes.
because I just had a thought. Paul, when he went into Mars Hill and he said, I'm going to proclaim the unknown God to you, he was going to a similar place,
Right.
a place such as the places you've visited, where people gather together to celebrate humanity or to celebrate the godlikeness of man and try to find God in man rather than by following God himself, who's left us a wonderful book called the Bible. That's ignored.
Right.
People gather together to find God in themselves. And for whatever reason, you're very sensitized to this, and you have followed it and documented it. And I think that your book, for that reason, is just an excellent read.
Part of what sets this apart is the fact that I have interacted at a very personal level with individuals on the political side, on the religious side, the cultural element, the technological aspect of oneness. And I've been in their midst. I've dined with them. I've spent time with them. I've discussed things with them. We've had some long and good conversations. And so you end up seeing them as people, which is really important because in our day and age, and Gary, you know this, we have a clickbait, meme-driven internet culture.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to distance ourselves from each other and just throw barbs back and forth. No, I want to see us engage. I want to see Christians being ambassadors for Christ. And really, that's what we're supposed to be, ambassadors for Christ. Well, what does an ambassador do? Really, what does an ambassador do? I was at a meeting a long time ago where the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia broke down what it means to be an ambassador to a foreign land coming from the United States. I listened to his presentation, and I took a lot of points from that, and I bridged that with the book as well. I've got a section where I talk about what it means to be an ambassador based on what I heard. He explained it this way, and I'm going to use the Christian aspect, the Christianese to it. We're the legal and lawful representatives of our King. Think about that. We're the legal, lawful, official representatives of the King of Kings in a foreign land. All of us as Christians, that's a high calling. I understand Paul's descriptive language when he talks about we're athletes in a race, or we're farm laborers, or we're soldiers. But when he uses the term ambassadors, it's harder for us to grasp that unless you've spent some time interacting with that community. Well, first of all, and that's really important, you are the legal representative of your king in a foreign land. What does an ambassador do? You know the culture, you study the culture. It doesn't mean you become the culture. You're set apart from that culture. But you study and know it enough so that you can relate the king's message to that culture in an effective manner.
Wow.
And that is key. We have to do that.
And that culture is becoming more and more estranged as time goes by. I was looking at your book, and by the way, this book is the place to go if you want to find out what's happening today on the dark side. If you want to know what to pray about, Carl's book, Game of Gods, will definitely inform you about what it is. And I was looking here at what you have to say about entertainment. And you mentioned Avatar, Star Trek, Space Odyssey, The Matrix, X-Men, iRobot, Gamer, Transcendence, Blade Runner, The Island, Virtuosity. I could just go on and on and on, but you get the idea. Entertainment has become spooky.
Oh, it's preaching to
dark,
you. Yes.
Religious.
Right.
And the religion is that you can become a Superman if the right thing happens to you.
Right, right. It has a religious message. It's preaching to you. I teach a course every couple of years or so at a Bible college on secular and pagan trends. And this is one thing, and this is where I pulled that section that you were referring to out of the book, which is a chapter on transhumanism. And I tell my students, listen, the culture is preaching to you. They are giving you a message. And that is exactly what you've just described in naming off those different movies. We have a culture, an entertainment industry that is preaching a message. They're selling you something. They're pitching something to you. What is it that they're pitching to you?
You can be as God.
Yes, 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 you can ascend. Your higher self can ascend through technology, through whatever the case may be, through different things that happen that transpire in the movie script. I mean, you look at it and go, wow, I want to be like that. You know what was interesting about the movie Avatar, which now is an old movie. It came out many years ago. Avatar really was the perfect transhumanist movie. technology. It came in as a major feature of the movie, helping the hero of the movie become more than human.
Yes.
There was a spirituality, a worship of the cosmos, a worship of the earth deities. And it wasn't on Earth, but it was that same kind of concept of Gaia, of Mother Earth. We're all cosmically tied in together. We're all interwired spiritually and otherwise, and we're all feeling like we're one. Well, what did that send as a message to the culture? It reaffirmed what we have been being told over and over and over again. You can't get away from this. And as Christians, we have a tendency to hide our heads in the sand. We don't like to talk about this type of material. We don't like to talk about where the culture is going. We like to complain about it, but we don't like to actually talk about it to the point where we are compelled to engage in it and engage as ambassadors. We like to hide our heads in the sand, but what happens when you hide your head in the sand? Number one, you don't know what's going on around you. That's obvious. But you expose your backside, and it gets kicked. And we've been having our backside kicked because we have not been observant to what is moving around in terms of the culture. And particularly, we have, I think, distanced ourselves to the point where we don't even recognize biblically what we need to do.
And if you're, let's say, 30 to 40 years old today, and you've grown up in public school, and you have gone to standard entertainment, bought your ticket and gone to the movies and had a Coke and a popcorn and so forth, and watched what can only be described as propaganda material about how you yourself can ascend to godhood, and you're sort of inspired. You know, I can remember going to the westerns when I was a little kid, and when I grew up, I wanted to ride a horse and shoot a six-shooter and all. But now we have evolved. It's not I want to shoot a six-shooter anymore. I want to be a demigod with supreme powers of some kind, if I could possibly do that, which sets you off on a course of looking for that. How can I achieve that?
Well, I mean, look at what we've been telling our children for the last 30 years plus, especially with the human potential movement, which I bring out in the book to some extent, which has always been this message of you can be anything you want to be. Well, we all grew up now thinking, I can be anything I want to be. I want to be God.
Sure.
And that's what we are pursuing.
Or God-like.
Or God-like. It's an age-old game of gods. And we're fooling ourselves.
By the way, I have to hold the book up. Game of Gods. It's a terrific read, and it does not cut corners. And having said that, let's go into politics, because we've talked about entertainment, we've talked about apostasy, we've talked about the falling away that was, by the way, predicted in prophecy for the last days. Now let's talk about politics. Local, global, what's happening in the political world that is pertinent to Game of Gods?
Wow, everything from Brexit blow-ups to Paris burning, which is ironic because part of the book delves into the French Revolution, Jacques Rousseau, and the intellectual influence that had on social revolution. Finding transformation through transgression, which is really what rebellion and revolution epitomizes, a transformation through transgression. And so we're watching Paris burn on the weekends now. We're seeing a world in turmoil. One of the chapters goes into politics at an international level because since 1997, I've been going to events that bring out some of this to the forefront. United Nations events, global governance events, a fly on the wall to try to understand what is it that we're trying to achieve. And I call that chapter The Cult of World Order. Because I want people to realize that politics, when you get to the level of what we want to do is restructure the world into our image. We want to build heaven on earth, create a utopia in our image. Well, now we're actually talking about religion. We're talking about a cult. This is a cult of world order.
And you know, it's been over 100 years since Marx and Trotsky and Lenin and Mao Zedong, and it's all 100 million people died worldwide, at least, because of various revolutions, all of which were designed around the concept you're speaking of.
Yes, yes. And those are the direct result of the French Revolution, the explosion that took place in thinking, ideologies,
And I have to
worldviews.
say, Dickens, Tale of Two Cities,
Yes.
it was the best of times, and it was the
worst.
worst of times. Well,
Right.
that could describe today.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're just living out this first lie of Genesis chapter 3, and we just do it in very complex ways, but ultimately it says the same thing. It has that same messaging that we are the ones who are in charge. We're the ones in charge of finding our own meaning and destiny. And I'll read you a quick quote from Gene Stapleton. You remember Gene Stapleton?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. All right. In Chapter 11, Cult of World Order, I take you to the United Nations. I take you to World Federalist meetings. World Federalism is this concept that what we can do is we can create a world order, a world government, through the principle of federalism. And I'm not going to go into the details except to say that there's organizations dedicated to that. And I take you with me to meetings where we discuss these principles. I take you to World Federalist meetings. Gene Stapleton, and I wrap up Chapter 11 with her words. And this is important because this tells us that this is really an aspect of redemption, redemption built in our image. The goal of the World Federalists is peace through unity of government. We must support their vision of oneness in diversity, for it is the salvation of humanity.
Salvation.
Yes, the oneness of that we experience in our diversity, and this concept of peace through government, the unity of global government. That is the salvation of humanity.
By the way.
No, it's not the salvation of humanity.
No, it's not. And salvation comes from only one place.
Right. Right.
But, I'm thinking of today's politics in America. Vicious,
oh yes.
gut-wrenching politics. And we have a whole new generation coming up, essentially preaching that we can save ourselves if we do the right things, if we pay homage to the right institutions
Yes.
and the right persona at the right time, then we will find salvation. But we have to give up all these wonderful things in order to do that. And allow one or two people to control everything. That's sort of the wondrous message that's being...
Oh, it sounds so good, doesn't it?
It does.
Because it devoids me then of the personal responsibility that I really should hold. It really takes that away and puts it on government and says, government, you are our great, you are our father, you are our mother, you look after us. We pay homage to you. Really, what I'm seeing with today's setting, especially in the United States, and remember, I'm Canadian. I'm not an American citizen, but we watch. The whole world watches America.
And we watch Canada, by the way.
And we're seeing turmoil in your land. We see,
Yeah.
I mean, your country is polarized.
Yes.
The world is becoming polarized. And how I'm looking at it, in many respects, is this is the fruit of the rebellion and the revolutionary mindset that was already in play in the 1960s. And that, you can read between the lines in the book, and you'll realize that really quickly. We're just now living out the dreams that were put before us 50 years ago.
Now, you have a section in your book called Fade to Green. Now, that's very, very, shall we say, pertinent at the moment.
Oh, yes.
Fade to green. Everybody wants to be green. What is this? Does it have anything to do with vegetation?
Where do we find our meaning if we have, to create, let's say, a new myth for how we want to live in this world? Well, ultimately, what we see governments do and what we see culture do, and I bring this out in that chapter, in that section, is we look at the earth, the environment, ecology, and that becomes our guiding principle. Everything we do then focuses on Earth. And Earth Day is a perfect example of that. I documented the history of Earth Day and how really it is an anti-Christian, was an anti-Christian movement and remains so, giving a completely different salvation message, a different redemption message. But how the politics of green interlock with economics, with government, And hey, right now, you've got some really interesting things happening in your own country with the Green New Deal coming into the public light. None of these ideas, though, are new. The Green New Deal isn't new. We were talking about these things at the UN back when I was at the United Nations Millennium Forum. We understood that if the world has to come together, if we're going to restructure society, we need some new myth that we can coalesce around. And it's our mother.
And by the way,
it's the pagan myth.
A pagan myth. If you're not green, you are a sinner.
Yes.
In the most literal sense.
Yes.
Because there's a religiosity attached to this.
Absolutely.
It's a world religion.
And if you don't agree with their version of redemption, you're the enemy.
Wow. We are talking with author Carl Teichrib, who is an excellent writer and a documentarian. I mean, he goes places, he listens, he watches, he talks to people, and gathers information about what's happening today. You read Game of Gods, and it's going to open your eyes. And as I said at the beginning of this program, you're going to have a prayer list a mile long, because this book informs you about what really needs to be prayed about as we speak in today's world. For your gift of $35, free shipping anywhere in the United States, we'll send you Game of Gods, and you will not regret owning this book. You may not read it all in one evening. You won't. You'll be taking notes. You'll be reading it over a period of time, and you'll be telling people about what you found in this book. By the way, Carl's gave us a couple of presentations at the recent Blessed Hope Prophecy Forum. One is called Game of Gods, the Temple of Man, and the other is called The Cult of the World Order. And we're going to send you these two DVDs along with the book Game of Gods for your gift of $35. ProphecyWatchers.tv, scroll down through the online bookstore. You're going to find Carl Teichrib's name, and you'll find this Game of Gods package, which you can easily order, and you will not regret having ordered it. In fact, Carl's presentations on DVD, I attended one of them, by the way. You probably didn't see me in the back of the room, but I was there.
I heard you were there.
And he's an excellent speaker, an excellent writer. We have just a few seconds, Carl. Sum it up, because there's a lot to sum up.
There's a lot to sum up. Listen, it's time that we take being an ambassador for Christ seriously. It is my hope, and really this is my hope, that this book will help equip you, help equip the Christian community to be effective ambassadors for Christ in a world of change. And it's time that we take our Christianity seriously as the world plays games of gods.
There's only one God.
Yes.
And only one Son of God. And he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And that's one of the sub-themes of your book. Carl Teichrib, we're going to talk to him again. There's just too much to go through in one program. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.